Hello, and welcome or welcome back to another episode of My Grocery Adventure. We are joined once again by Will Katz, ready to hear the second chapter of his story. We left off with Will's story last time at the end of, towards the end, I guess I should say, of, was it 17 years that you spent at the manufacturing
Yes,
plant?
it was
Is that what it's
17
called?
years. Sure.
Manufacturing plant? Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Close enough. So yeah, 17 years. And so my question, anytime I hear somebody was at a place for that long or in a job or even a career for that long and then left to go do something else, my first question is why? Why stay that long and then make the change? It's almost always a very interesting story leading up to how a change like that unfolds. So I
Well,
would love if we could jump in there.
I would be happy to, and I don't know how interesting it is. It might be disappointing. I
We'll
get
see.
this. I know, I have like kind of the long hair and a little
Uh-huh.
bit different look to me, and I sometimes think that maybe I have this appearance of being this totally unconventional thinker, and maybe I'm not. In fact, maybe what I am is just kind of your typical change averse American person. And so the very simple reason that I'm not still there is that the business wasn't sustainable and it didn't make it. The business went out of business in 2004, uh,
Mm,
and so like this is it was a pretty significant business in the Lawrence area. We did, probably between 25 and 30 million in revenues most of the last 10 years. We had probably anywhere from maybe about 160 to maybe 280 or so employees over that time. Like, not an insignificant business by any stretch of anybody's imagination. If you think about it in economic development terms, it's what they refer to as a primary job creator. In other words, the money came from outside of the community. We were selling stuff all over the country. Money comes in, you pay your local employees, and then that money tends to recycle in a local economy. And so these things are like, they're powerful. Every community wants these types of primary jobs.
yeah.
Manufacturing jobs typically are that. So this was a business that was really built by a founding owner, and this guy's name was Roger White. He started the business in the 1950s, and he was just a total visionary, kind of a like shade tree mechanic, shade tree engineer kind of guy. But he built something that was real and lasted a really good long time. And so by the time I hopped on board in 1987, it was a pretty significant business employing hundreds of people, doing millions in revenue. Roger passed away in 1995, I believe. And I think from that point forward, the business lasted another almost 10 years. Um, and I think at some point, I I think I knew that it was kind of bound to happen the way that it did. You never really knew when exactly, but I just think it's hard for a business to kind of get passed on to another generation in a sustainable way. And so, I, if you think if you knew Roger, you would probably consider him kind of a swashbuckling business type, right? And he um, didn't mind taking chances and being wrong, and that's actually kind of important in business. Like, you have to. I don't think anybody likes to take risks. There's this notion of entrepreneurs being just like, whatever, I will do anything. I don't think that's true. I
I
think entrepreneurs actually visualize risk really well, and they understand how to push when there's an advantage that they see that nobody else sees. And so I think that's what Roger did. There was an advantage in the thing that he was doing, and he didn't mind putting millions of dollars at risk to kind of stake this, to push this advantage that he felt that he had. And I think he was right. And then I think often when a business gets to the next generation of ownership, what you've got are the second generation of owners were kind of raised with this business as their birthright, like this thing that's worth millions of dollars, and it's always been there since they were children. And in fact, I think there were 4 kids, and 2 of them had primarily worked in the business all of their adult lives anyway, most of their adult lives. And so there's this notion of this thing as a provider of salaries and a provider of opportunities. Um, and so that thing becomes this precious thing that you never want to risk. You really want to, kind of
Mm.
pamper it a little bit too much. And so when you're, think of it this way. I once had a 1975 Oldsmobile Delta 88 convertible, just a beautiful car. And a car like that requires pretty significant and consistent maintenance. And if you do the maintenance and you keep the thing beautiful, it'll run forever and it'll be worth more and more money as time goes by. But if you don't, it kind of turns into a hulk, just a hunk of rust and junk, and it ends up in the bone yard, in the bone pile, and it's not worth very much at all. And I think the same thing is kind of, you can at least think of it, it's not exactly the same, but you can think of it that way for a business. And so if that second generation is all about protecting this thing, this asset, you run the risk of, well, no, we're not going to sink a bunch of money into that, because what if it doesn't work? We're just going to keep doing things the way that we're doing.
Mm.
If you think about manufacturing in the United States in the late 20th century and into the early 21st century, um, it was a time of great competitiveness. A lot of that competitiveness came from overseas, and in fact, I mean, you can look this up, and but I think that what has continued to happen, is that American manufacturing is pretty healthy in a lot of ways. And one of the ways in which it's most healthy is efficiency and competitiveness. So folks that can figure out how to do things here really efficiently have been very successful and have manufacturing enterprises that are awesome. Manufacturing as a share of total employment in the economy continues to drop, and that probably may still be the case, but people who can do it well can do it well and do it profitably. And I think what happened to that business is that when you stop making that really constant investment, um, now we're bidding manufacturing jobs, and we've got pieces of machinery that can do hundreds of part impressions per minute, and we're bidding against people who can literally do thousands of part impressions per minute. You just
Mm.
can't be competitive anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened to the business. And so we lost some important customers, and we um, kind of continued to try to downsize something that isn't really all that downsizable. I mean, once you get below a certain point, it's just not the same anymore. Like, you can't do it. So yeah, Roger passed away in 1995, and by 2004 the business was gone. And I
Mm.
think, that's after not one, not two, but three, I think, pretty significant layoffs. And a lot of us, including myself, again, we sort of saw it coming. We just didn't really know when exactly. We didn't know what the final catalyst would be.
Mhm.
So, I
Mhm.
mean, I would tell you, I would probably still be there. And again, that speaks to more of this notion of maybe I'm just a change averse, not outside of the box thinking. Like, man, you give me something that works and I'll just stick with that thing that works and I'd be pretty happy. I'm a pretty simple guy. It doesn't take a lot for me to feel engaged. I don't need I'm not constantly striving to do everything better. Like, if life works, I'm happy in it, you know?
Which,
um,
yeah,
I don't know. I'm not a super religious person. I have at least a little bit of a religious education. My sister is a rabbi. I think I mentioned that last time.
yeah,
And so I have kind of this favorite psalm, and what it says is, today, this is the day that God has made. Be happy and rejoice in it, in that thing which has been made. And you know what? I love that. That's a great notion. I don't always have to be thinking about, you know, what what will make life even more awesome and better.
yeah,
Um, if I like it, I'm good. And I,
oh,
I was really happy there, really
yeah,
happy. And so I felt like, I went back to school and I got a master's degree in business administration. Um, I had an undergraduate double major in Russian language and philosophy, and I felt like that wasn't adequately display my capabilities. If I lost my job, I might end up, carting trays of food around at the Free State Brewing Company in downtown Lawrence. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Oh, great
My
brewery. Yeah.
absolute best friend. In fact, the current director of the KU Small Business Development Center, my successor in that role, Christina Edwards, has carted trays of food around at the Free State Brewery. So it is a perfectly noble occupation, but I just wasn't quite ready for that. So I went back to school and got an MBA, and probably, spent years at least preparing for the eventuality that I thought might befall us all, and it did.
So you went back for your MBA while you were still working at the plant. And
Yes,
you
I
did
did.
that because you had an inkling that the plant is most likely not going to be here forever.
I think that was a big part of it. Yeah.
Were there
Yeah.
other parts of it?
Well, some of it was just, um, I, I loved business. Like, I loved participating in business, and I wanted to learn more about it. Again, my undergraduate degrees weren't in that, but here's this thing that I'm experiencing and participating in every day. So, like, maybe I'll try to learn some more about that. Wouldn't that be smart? Yeah.
Wouldn't that be smart? That's a good guess for sure. How did you land on Russian and philosophy? Can we go back
Well,
to that before we move forward? Like, that's just too random, no offense, to not
no,
why, how did that become a thing?
yeah, I can see that. I think I just sort of gravitated to philosophy, and I'm not sure why. Just, it seemed like something that I would want to study. I, I, I don't want to try to discourage any future philosophy majors that may be listening to this podcast, but I think I would be quick to tell you that what I thought was this kind of study of thought ended up being more of a study of this particular body of work that has since been canonized as this thing called philosophy. And so we go back and study the history of this particular canon. And so we'll study, Socrates and Aristotle and, Immanuel Kant and maybe Nietzsche if we're lucky. And just this one body of thought, John Stuart Mill into the 20th century, that somehow, looking back on it, we call it philosophy. And I'm not at all convinced that there weren't kind of concurrent schools of thought throughout the non-European world that were every bit as influential and as important. In fact, I'm sure there were. um, so I kind of got a little bit disillusioned with it, and I was disillusioned even by the time I was not yet done with my degree. um, this is really strange, but Russian, I think, was a number of things. One of the more proximate things was that I actually lived with a college roommate who was born in Russia, and whose family managed to uh, emigrate from Russia and come to the United States on, like, religious freedom grounds, I believe, in the early 1970s, I think mid 1970s. And he was just a super fascinating guy, honestly. And then also, as a kid, I studied Hebrew, right, and got a bar mitzvah. So I think this is not uncommon, probably, with Jewish folks. Starting when I was, say, 10 years old, I studied a language that was very different from English. Hebrew, in fact, reads right to left instead of left to right.
Mhm.
And, you know, uh, like, the alphabet's not the same, right? And so if you think about something like Russian, um, I guess I just felt like, okay, I already fulfilled my foreign language requirement, believe it or not, with Spanish. Like, my first semester in college, I took like a fourth semester Spanish class. It's good. You're good. You don't have to take anymore. But I just wanted to learn the language. That's all. I can't give you any good reason.
And
And then,
the Russian person you lived with, like, is this just someone you met in Lawrence and decided like you were friends and you wanted to live together, or was it more arranged than that, or how
no,
did
no, it was exactly that.
yeah.
I was just
Okay.
somebody that I met. He was friends of friends. There were actually four of us that lived in this house
Uh-huh.
together. It was kind of like a big undergraduate crash pad party shack,
Sure.
you know,
Sure, sure.
kind of thing. Um, and um, it wasn't until after that, in fact, that I decided to major. I think he was kind of. We were no longer living together, when I decided that that's what I'd study.
Hmm.
But I did, and then I think what happened was I managed to. I'm not sure how I made this work, but I did a summer semester in St. Petersburg, Russia, in the early 1990s, which was awesome. Oh my God, just one of the
Mhm.
best experiences of my life. You know, I'd already been working in the factory for probably 4 or 5 years, and just
Oh, wow.
that, that's a weird. When I look back on it, at the time, it didn't seem like much. It just seemed like this is my day, this is my life, this is what I have to do. But when you go to school full time during the day and then you work a 4 to midnight shift in the factory, that's a real, that double life is real. You know, it's the last day of finals, it's the last day of semester, it's December 14th, and I come into the factory and I'm excited, and another semester gone, and they don't give a damn, man. Kid, you're working over there today, get over there,
Right.
and
Get your
start
thing going.
slopping the pig
Yeah.
shit around or whatever it is
Right.
that
Right.
they didn't care at all. Um, so yeah, it was a real kind of double life, and so to have managed to kind of made the economics work out, to be able to take a semester and do a study abroad, like it just wasn't something that I ever really thought of as a realistic possibility for myself. And so, it required taking a couple extra little loans, and I'd really tried to do college without it, and kind of some sacrifices, whatever. And it was just so worth it to be in a position where like I didn't have to work 40 hours a week in addition to whatever else I was learning. So it was really cool and fun and formative, and being that far from home and in a culture that was really that different. Put it to you this way: when I got done in Russia, I went and spent 10 days in France, and that was like coming home. Like being in France is like, oh my God, now it's not Kansas, but it sure is pretty darn close in almost every single way, compared to Russia, which was really different at that time.
So how long were you in Russia?
Like 2.5 months, I guess, something like that. A summer. It was a summer semester.
Were you already pretty fluent in Russian by the time you were there?
No,
No?
not at all. I mean, I had taken it. I want to say I had taken 4 college semesters of it, so I could read it pretty well. I could certainly read what was in front of me and transliterate it. I don't know that I could always tell you what that said in English, but most of the time, you know, I knew what was a restaurant and what the sign for the bathroom looked like.
Sure.
Enough to be dangerous. I probably wasn't capable of discussing abstract concepts like freedom, or economic development in Russian language.
Sure.
But that's kind of the point of the program. There were, yes, many college students, but the Army also has a language program. I can't remember what they call it, but DIE, I think. D, DLI, Defense Language Institute, maybe what it's called.
Hmm.
And there were a bunch of DLI Army officers in this program as well. The program was at a like I think they called it a school of the mines, but basically it's sort of the Russian version of like a land grant university in the United States, probably like being at Kansas State or Oklahoma State. And so, yeah, I was at their version of that in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Hmm.
It was great. By the time I came back, I was, dreaming when I was asleep. I was dreaming in Russian. It was a very immersive program, so I could sure speak it a lot better when I got back than when I landed there.
Yeah.
So it
Like,
was worth
what
it.
else about that experience of being in Russia for 2.5 months? Like, what else jumps out as something that's like culture shock or super memorable?
Well, one of the most memorable things was just the when you're that far north in latitude in the summer, the sun doesn't really go down. Like there's about 3 weeks there where it sort of goes down, it dips to the horizon sort of and scoots around a little bit, but it doesn't really go down. And so I vividly remember 11 o'clock p.m. throwing the frisbee around the courtyard out in front of this public building that I was living in for the summer with some of my college friends. You know, like the weather was beautiful. I mean, it doesn't get 110 degrees there, at least it didn't at the time, and the sun doesn't go down. So we just had fun like 20 hours a day and slept 4.
Well, especially if you're not working on top of all
Because
your other things, like
yeah,
you actually get to live a little.
for sure.
Yeah.
Another thing that occurred that I think of all the time is just sort of notions of like personal safety and security. Like, um, and I think it was probably a little bit different here then too. But there, man, in 1991 or 92, like the, people just didn't like wasn't a neighborhood that you could go to where people were going to get shot in St. Petersburg, Russia, really. Like guns were really rare and that kind of violent crime. Um, I mean, for one thing, I mean, I stuck out like a sore thumb as an American. You would have never not known that I was. So while somebody might try to kind of rip me off, like a cab driver might try to overcharge me if they thought that I didn't understand the math, or like money changing was a real thing. Like um, American dollar being a hard currency and being convertible against the rest of the world currencies, and to exchange dollars for rubles, like you could do it in a bank at a certain rate that wasn't the best rate that you could get. But there was a lot of stuff that you couldn't buy with dollars there, and there's a lot of stuff that you can't buy with rubles there. So it's always good to have some of both. But if you're willing to exchange at a better rate, then there's some risk there of some of these exchangers, kind of gray market exchangers. Like you could get ripped off, or somebody could try.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the notion of like severe or serious bodily injury, like it wasn't there.
Yeah.
It just there.
Like you felt safe in Russia. That's
Completely. Much safer than in 1992 in the United States. Much safer.
really
Yeah.
that, see, and now that's shocking, and that's what I asked for. So that's good.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really not something I expected to hear, but I'm glad that you felt that way. That's cool. I love getting to hear, what's it actually like to go there, because we can paint a lot of pictures in our heads, but until you
Right.
actually go there, and especially if you stay there for a while,
Hmm.
then you have a better idea of what it is. And granted, that
Yeah.
was early 90s, not right now, but
They had also a really cool notion of like public spaces, where I mean, just the museums and the parks were beautiful and really actually very well maintained. People's apartments tended to be really small, and fairly multi-generational. Like people's living spaces, I think, weren't quite as important, um, but the public spaces were massively important. And so if you met somebody, I mean, maybe they'd have you, come vgosti is what they call it, as a guest to their apartment, but you might not stay there very long because you'd probably end up maybe going to some more public, like a park or a restaurant or a museum or something. And the public spaces were beautiful. The not public spaces were far less than what we as Americans would have been accustomed to, I think, for the most part.
mm,
Um, the building that I lived in, I think it was probably about 20, 22 stories. And the first story was a cafeteria that was just for the American students only. The next, probably 4 or 5 floors, were dorm rooms just for the American students only. The next 6 or 8 floors were dorm rooms, but only for the non-American students, only for Russian students. And then the top, whatever, 10 or however many floors were left, were just apartments with families. So it was like that's an unusual, sort of an unusual situation. And so on the elevator, you could interact with, you know, a Russian family, and usually these are probably at least 3 generations living together in an apartment.
mm. Did you meet anybody that you kept in touch with after you came back?
You know, sadly, nobody that I'm still in touch with today. Not true. Some of the American students that didn't go to KU. I mean, we had students from Georgetown and from William and Mary and from a couple of other, and I am at least in some amount of contact with some of those folks. The Russian folks that I met, though, I'm sorry to say, no. I mean, there was one guy that I met that I stayed in touch with for probably 5 or 10 years. It just got too hard. I mean,
Yeah.
this is sort of before the social media era had dawned upon us, and um, I'm I'm not happy to say that I let a couple of those relationships just go because it's just too hard.
It happens. It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's your college. I really, after the first episode, I thought of that afterwards. I was like, wait, we didn't get to talk about his major and his Russia thing. And
Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to hear a little bit more about that. So,
Yeah.
okay, so now to pick back up where we left off a minute ago,
Okay.
you got your MBA, the business, you saw it coming for a while, but now it
Mhm.
has officially gone out of business. You said you
Yep.
just didn't know like what the final catalyst would be. Was there a final catalyst, or was it just like the time has come and this is what it is?
Yeah, I think there were a number of things. I mean, I think the business had sort of struggled with just kind of basic liquidity for a while, just to have enough operating cash to do what we needed to do, and business kind of continued to decline and decline and decline. And yeah, I can't remember if there was. I mean, I think we had lost a couple of customers. I think it was just liquidity more than anything.
Yeah,
Just ran out of the ability to keep borrowing the money to do the things that we needed to do.
yeah.
So yeah, it was tough. I mean, it was really hard.
Yeah. So like are you like late 30s in this at this point? Is that right?
36. Yeah.
Okay, mid 30s. So what came next? Did you have like a long period of unemployment or was there
I,
something kind of right there? Or
so I did not actually, and this really was this was formative for me. I mean, it really was. I mean, I'm 36 years old. I've worked in the same business for 17 years. I started when I was 19 years old. And,
yeah,
and I did have a brief 6-month venture elsewhere, but I came back home and it was home. And I still have lunch with some of these folks. I think we've got like an every 3-week standing lunch date. And one of my friends there actually passed away last week. I think he was 77 years old. And like, these people are still important in my life, and I
yeah,
communicate with more than just a few.
yeah,
uh, but yeah, here it is. And so I think we had like there's sort of a 90-day, our last day will be this, and we still had some stuff that we needed to get done and worked out through the manufacturing processes and get to some of the clients that had already paid us and all that. And so maybe I should be sad about this, but like, I think most of us, oh man, I had some job applications out. It's like, okay, I've got whatever it is, 90 days, 120 days. I need to start applying. And I did. And I got an interview and I got an offer pretty quickly. So I actually left before the last day, but it was long after the last day had been set in stone. And was I sort of important there? Yeah, I guess. But I also knew good and well that some of the other folks would be there till the end, probably wouldn't have the same opportunity to get a close enough to lateral move as what I got.
yeah.
So I actually went to work for the Target Corporation, the distribution arm of the Target Corporation. And they were opening up a distribution center, I don't know, 30, 40 miles down the road from my house near Forbes Field in Topeka. And so it was just opening up. It had not opened yet. And they're kind of in the process of hiring their kind of day of open management staff.
Hmm.
And it was actually a great experience. It really was. Um, I spent that summer, I can't remember when they hired me, early summer, and I spent the rest of that summer in Bakersfield, California, um, because I had to go work at a distribution center that was actually operating for enough for me to kind of understand the systems and the way that it really worked, so I could come back and coach the brand new team that was coming into a brand new facility.
Hmm.
Uh, and they treated me really well. They flew me home every couple weeks, and they, put me up in a, extended stay hotel. And I mean, it was great. They were very good to me. The
Hmm.
the training was excellent. It's a really good organization, I feel like, and I learned a lot there. But here's the big but. I think that often companies like that tend to value people that are really tied to that organization, to that company, and they don't value people who are tied inextricably to their communities. And I think that's what happened to me. So I came back and I'd gone through the training and the distribution center open, and I was there for a little more than a year. And I think that they thought very highly of me. I think they thought I did a very good job. And so at one point in time, one of my managers pulled me aside, and I was like a lower, like a, I think it was called group leader. So sort of a lowish level manager, but hoping to get into that sort of more middle management ranks. And that's also sort of the clearest, the biggest salary break. Like if you go from where I was to the next step up, it was pretty significant. And so one of them brought me into their office and said, "Hey, we really like you, and we'd like to, consider you for a promotion. We think you'd be great in this management level. Would you prefer Savannah, Georgia, or DeKalb, Illinois?" Were my choices. And I was like, "Ooh, no, I don't think so."
I don't prefer
I,
either one of these.
I don't prefer either one. Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I was more tied to my community, and I wasn't. And I saw this at Target. I should have known. I should have known by a year in, because I'd see people that would go, from Minneapolis to Bakersfield to Topeka, and I thought, well, okay, so they're in whatever this middle management level is, but like it feels to me like they're just trying to stay one step of accountability ahead of accountability by moving every 6 months, and then nobody catches up to the fact that they're not really sure what they're doing, or they're not really that great of a leader or whatever. So I just said no. And then it wasn't long after that that they offered me another choice, and it was I could go to headquarters, or I can't even remember where the other place was that they offered me. And I said no again. And then right after that, my fortunes changed pretty dramatically in the world of Target. Again, like I say, I think they thought very highly of me. They had made me I was the captain for all safety related anything in that entire building, 1 million square feet, and I don't know, 800 employees or whatever. So it was like, these were not small things. I was also the captain for a particular software installation that we were doing. They don't give people those opportunities, I think, if they don't think pretty highly of them and consider them candidates for promotion. And then after these two episodes, like within days, literally, I was, again, they were saying the nice things. "Hey, we think you're great and you've done a great job. So we're going to put you in an area that we've had some trouble." And so it was shift work. They moved me to a shift that was Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So my work week started at 6 p.m. Saturday and ended at 6 p.m. Tuesday. I'm no stranger to working through the middle of the night. I mean, I was a factory guy myself, and I had had shift work jobs before that, even. But I think I felt like at 36, 37 years old, probably by that point in time, like, whew, man, I don't know. I was married, and my wife was working much more standard hours, and that was just a real challenge for me. It wasn't one that I'd been looking for, let's put it that way. And so it didn't take long for it to become fairly clear to me that that the notion of them considering me as a candidate for a promotion, like, it would have to happen outside of Topeka, outside of that facility. It would have to be, hundreds of miles away. It would require me to move, and that's not a decision one person can make for a married couple. And again, I just looked around me and I saw ex-military folks tended to do pretty well at Target, and
Mhm.
God love them. But again, you're probably talking about folks who um, tend to be more attached to their unit than to the community that they live in, because they know what community they live in. That's just a matter of chance and time. Like, you're going to get moved around if you're in the military. And I think that was sort of the Target notion as well. And I can't help but think that there's some intentionality there. Businesses do that. Like, there's something about it that when somebody is too tied to their community, that's not great for Target as an employer.
Mhm.
And I probably fit into that category. So once they moved me, it became really clear that that's where I was going to be for a pretty long time.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's kind of where I got my opportunity, my second career, right? So my first career is just manufacturing and distribution operations and managing lots of people, up to a couple hundred. And you know what? That was also sort of how I self-defined. Like I was a person who was really comfortable having being responsible for the work performed by dozens of other people. It was cool. I liked it. I felt like I was good at it, and that
Mhm.
um, if you can relate to people and if you can be genuine with people, like if you can treat them well, and they, generally speaking, people want to work and they want to do a good job, and if they don't feel like they're being taken advantage of and they like the person that they work for, they do well. I mean, studies show over and over again, like, why do people leave jobs? It's not necessarily just because of the money. It's because they like or they don't like the person they work for. I mean, that's a lot. That's
Right.
everything.
There's like
Um,
a slightly different version of that quote where it's like people don't leave jobs, they leave managers.
yeah,
They leave the boss
yeah,
that they're working for. They can't take it anymore. And so
right,
yeah, you may love your job, but not click with your person who's responsible for managing you. And that
yeah.
changes everything. So,
It really does.
and not everybody has your same stance on like, I'm comfortable with this, being responsible for a lot of other people's work. I
Yeah,
like this. Like, I mean, I feel like managing people is something that either you love it or you hate it. I haven't met very many people in that middle ground where they're like, it's okay. I do it if I have to, but it's not my favorite thing.
yeah.
It's like, mm,
I'm not in that middle ground. I really love it. I mean, it,
yeah,
it was something that made me feel connected to interconnected to everything. Again, when I worked at the company I worked for 17 years, like, man, I to this day I come across people, who worked there for one summer 20 years ago, and like, I mean, I might remember who they are, believe it or not. Like, I was pretty connected. I knew a lot of the people that worked there. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, and I like being that connected.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I
So that,
I'm somebody who, you've heard people say, oh, well, I never forget a face. Sometimes I don't remember the name. I never forget a face. I'm the opposite. I never forget a name. That's just the way my memory works. And I might forget what somebody looked like, but if they tell me their name, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember you. You were on second shift and you stripped off the back of the Mealy die cutter and you worked for Virginia, didn't you? And they're like, yeah, how did you know that? Well, I just remember the name.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
Everybody, different.
I just liked feeling connected that way. And so as I was working at Target and I was realizing that, like, they didn't view my future the same way I did. And again, today is the day that God has made. Be happy and rejoice in it. And so it's okay. I've got a job. It pays me enough to survive. I don't mind. The thing is, like, I couldn't see myself working overnight weekends for the rest of my life. It didn't work with the rest of my non-work life very well. So I
Hmm.
kind of just started gently exploring what it might look like to not do that anymore. And so, I wasn't, you know, rabid about it, but I was just applying for other jobs and seeing what stuff came up and putting out applications and resumes and just being pretty selective about it. And one day I read the Sunday paper in the Lawrence Journal World, and they had what they call their Progress Edition. And I think they still do it once a year. And in the Progress Edition, I was reading about, you know, businesses in the community, and I read an article that featured a guy named Kurt Klinkenbeard. And Kurt was the director of the KU Small Business Development Center. And I'd never heard of that. And so I read the article, and Kurt was talking about all the things that they do with small businesses to help small businesses. And I thought, I used to work for a small business. We only did 25 or 30 million in revenues. We only had a couple hundred employees. I mean, that's really small, right? So small.
Oh, that's
So,
huge.
and then as I sort of alluded to before, um, the, like the time that time of transition was a tough one for me, but it was also really tough for the other, 180 people that worked there. And some of them landed on their feet. Some of them found other opportunities pretty quickly, or opportunities that matched their skills, or opportunities that matched their pay. Some did even better, and some never did kind of get back to that level. Some, the skills that they had were really unique, or they were developed by that company, but they just didn't translate very well to another company. I mean, I know another guy. This is not a friend from work. In fact, I never worked with this guy, but he went out of college. He went to work for Enterprise Rent a Car, which was at that time, huge growing company. And he went to work in HR, and did HR work for Enterprise. And he worked there for like 20 years, and he got laid off, I think, in his early 40s, maybe mid 40s. And he was talking to me, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm looking for. Nobody's calling me back. Hey, send me your resume. He sends me his resume. I read through it. I call him up. I ask him a few questions. It becomes pretty clear to me, as somebody who has at least a little bit of HR experience for, my original company. And then Target does a very good job with HR training kind of across the board. It became very clear to me that he didn't actually know much about HR. What he knew about was enterprise HR, which is a different thing than HR writ large. So he kind of got sort of too much specificity in his training. And so I saw a lot of that with my former colleagues at this company, that where what they knew about wasn't easily translatable to some other job. It just wasn't. Like, what they knew about was strictly what we did. And so I would tell you that that became a really important point for me in my life, just in terms of, I don't know how to say this. I don't want to sound like I'm thinking of myself as any more important or selfless than I am at all, because I don't think that's it. But man, I just had radical thoughts around this time of, like, again, how lucky am I, right? Like, I have this all this privilege, and I have, okay, this place is going out of business. Man, it was basically almost a lateral move salary wise for me to go take this job at Target. I literally stopped working at E&E on Friday and started at Target on Monday. I mean, I
Yeah.
had zero downtime at all. And I'm looking at people, not just people, but my friends, people that I've been friends with for 15 years, and the business closes and they're struggling, and the opportunities aren't quite there for them in the same way that they were for me. And I'm just, it's kind of like soul crushing, right? And and just thinking about, like, what could I do? Like, how could I ease that for somebody? Just if there's one person, if there are two people. And so a couple people, I helped them get employment at the distribution center with me. And that worked out really well for a couple of them. Just anything. Like, it occurred to me just how, man, that was a, it was just a real inflection point in the lives of a lot of people. For
Yeah.
some, things got better. For some, things got, like, not just a little worse, but quite a bit worse. And so why, and what could I do? Just thinking about how to help people. And so when I read this article in the journal World's Progress edition about the KU Small Business Development Center, I thought, okay, I know small business because I used to work in one, or so I thought. And,
Sure.
I've got a master's degree in business administration. And more to the point, my work week ends at 6 o'clock Tuesday morning. And I don't got to be anywhere again until 6 o'clock Saturday evening. So I've really, Tuesday, you get home, you sleep all day. But man, I've got all of Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday available. And sure enough, the article, Kurt is quoted as saying, we do all these things to help small businesses, and the interviewer is like, well, you know, what do you not do? And he's like, well, we just need more resources. I mean, if we had more resources, we could help even more people, and it would be great. And so, like, the very next day, I'm calling on the phone. I'm like, how can I help? I got nothing to do Wednesday through Friday, and I sure do know small business. Let me just tell you. So he invites me to come in and bring a resume, and he sits down and talks to me. And I'm sure that within 5 minutes, what he realizes, I don't know a damn thing about small business, actually, really, at this point in time. What I consider small is by no definition, well, other than the SBA's crazy definition, but by no means small. The SBA definition, if we can detour to that for just a second,
Sure.
I think the SBA tells us that anything is a small business with fewer than 500 employees and 100 million in revenue. That would be like, Carly, I like basketball. How do you feel about basketball? Do you like
I
it?
couldn't care less. Yeah.
Well, I do. And the thing that I don't like about it is that I don't like watching really tall people play it. It seems like it should be more of an every person sport. You don't got to be 7 feet tall to be good at it. So I'm going to start a new basketball league, and it's only for people who are 7 feet tall or shorter. And that's the SBA's definition of a small business.
Can
Like you
exclude like
exclude
1% of
like
businesses.
1%, exactly, maybe two, maybe two.
There's like three people who can't play basketball in your
There
life.
are very few
Yeah,
people who can't play.
I
Yeah.
get it. I get what
So
you're saying. Yeah.
so what I think of as small business, and in reality, 76, I think, percent of businesses in Kansas are considered non-employers. In other words, 5 or fewer employees. Um, I want to say something like uh, 90% of all businesses do less than 500,000 in sales, something like that. I mean, small businesses are a lot smaller than what I thought they were in 2006. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
I had absolutely no conception of what small business was really all about at that time. But I wanted to help, and I had a degree, and I guess he determined that I was at least not a scammer and I was genuine and smart enough to kind of learn things. And so he did a really good job of kind of putting me. One of the first projects that I had was sort of a like a workflow mapping in, I mean, I guess manufacturing company, but I think they had more like 10 employees. And it was just, you know, I walked in one day and they formed stuff over here and they painted it over there and then they did something to it over here and then it went here and then it went back to here. Like they just had a workflow that was not optimal for the space they were in. And so I kind of helped them remap things just a little bit. And he gave me some projects that like I could actually do, things that I knew reasonably well. And over time I learned a little bit about small business. So while this was all going on, one day I walked into the office and I said, Kurt, would you mind if I used you as a job reference? I'm really tired of working this overnight weekend stuff. It's hard. And so I'm applying for jobs. It's nothing serious, but I figure I might, you probably know me better than some of these folks at Target because, you actually spend time with me and you see the work that I'm doing with these folks. Of course, Will, I would be happy to. A week later, he comes back to me and he says, wait a minute, are you serious? You're looking for an actual job? And I said, yeah, I'm completely serious. This staying up all night is for the birds. And he said, I've actually been thinking about leaving this job and I just wasn't sure how because this center was kind of in rough shape before I got here and I put some things in place and I feel like it's going really well. And I just have been thinking about doing some other things. Is this a job that you would ever be interested in? And so that's how my second career started. If my first career is manufacturing and distribution operations and having huge numbers of people work with me, my second career is related more to small business and economic development and kind of the micro workings of that. In other words, I see macro, but I work micro. I'm working with individual people and individual businesses on things that move their ideas or their businesses forward. And so that's kind of a big revolution. That's a big change. And that's how I kind of mark career path number one and career path number two. So,
In a weird way, the first one kind of led to the second one. Like,
Oh, most certainly. Yeah.
again, like if the first company hadn't closed and kind of laid everybody off, and then if Target hadn't like tried to get you out of, where you live, like if they had let you promote like up through the ranks, like at the Topeka Center, I mean, again, like it sounds like your change of verse self probably would have just like stayed right there.
Yeah, you nailed it. Long hair, tattoos, but yeah, I'm a pretty change averse. Like I may look sort of radical in some ways, but that's not really me. I mean, I'm
Just
pretty
get comfy and
change
hang out.
averse,
Yeah.
steady Eddie, lunch bucket Larry, you know,
Wait, what was the second one?
lunch bucket Larry.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
yeah, all of
Steady
those
Eddie.
things kind of conspired to put me in the position to move towards this other career. Yeah, so many
Totally.
different things could have gone differently, and I'd have been perfectly happy, in environments, where I was. Well, and the funny thing is, I probably still would have had to have moved because, like, that while that exists, it's hard to say that that would exist in Lawrence. Like, those opportunities might have pushed me elsewhere if I kind of continued to try to go down career path number one.
Hmm.
So yeah, number two is informed by the importance of just trying to help people like my friends at my first job, who some of them found other things and some of them really never did kind of recover all the way. Like the impact on economic development on a local economy is significant. I can't wave a magic wand and do make much difference in a local economy, because even that economy of scale is huge. But what I can do is I can work with this company. And if I
Hmm.
can help this company do something, then maybe they get to a place where they can hire two more people or three more people or five more people. And if I can do that across 10 different companies, then hey, maybe that's 20 or 30 or 40 jobs. And maybe one of my old friends gets one of those. And wouldn't that be cool?
Wouldn't that be cool? Anything could happen. It's
And
possible.
so that was sort of the kind of the impetus, I think, for career path number two. And I think that what do I do? I'm not sure how to answer that. I do a variety of consulting engagements, and then that has transitioned into business valuation work, which is still about kind of informing people and helping them make the right decision for their business or for themselves personally. Because boy, one of the things about small business, everyone wants to talk about how they keep their business and their personal lives separate. It doesn't happen. Forget about it. Not even possible. The smaller the business gets, the less it's possible.
Yeah.
So, like, helping people understand, give them permission to, oh, your parent just died. That you have to, don't even think that you can fight through that. You can't. If you did, it'll be worse in the long run. Oh, you're going through a divorce. I'm so sorry to hear that. I've been through one. It sucks. It's one of the worst things that I've ever had to deal with. But don't convince yourself that that's not having an impact on your business, because it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. The smaller the business is, the more it is only a reflection of the person or people who are running it.
100% true.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's career path number two. And so my kid is now 11, and so this goes back a few years. When my kid was about 7 or 8, I remember we were at school, and one of the, I think it was like the first day of school, one of the or first week of school, one of the teachers said, "So what? Oh, this is your dad. What does your dad do?" My dad helps people. Like, that was my child's version of what I did for a living, and
Your job title.
my heart swelled with pride. I help people. That's what I
My
do
dad
for a living.
helps people.
Yeah,
Dude, that's a great foundation of
couldn't get any better.
perfect summary of what you do.
And it is certainly, like, I don't help people get past cancer. I don't give them chemotherapy. I don't set their broken leg and put that in a cast. I don't help them in that way. It's a pretty specific and small tranche of their lives, but helping them figure out something that's going on in their business, like, that really is actually pretty important
Yeah.
to, to that person at that time.
Yeah.
And the the more the better I do it, the better things go for them, and the better things go for me, and the better life is. And it's great. It's fun. I love it. I'm again, it's sort of like kismet. It's luck. I mean, I don't know that I'm not sure I could be in a better place
Yeah.
for me, for my skill set, for what my desires are. When you think about the ways that I like to be connected to my community and the ways that I like to be connected to people, it just, again, this is not planned. And I think that's a pretty big theme of what you're doing here. Like, I sure as heck didn't plan for that business to go out. I mean, I knew it probably would. I planned around that a little bit. I really thought when I was at Target, I thought there was a good chance I'd retire from there, at least in that first year, until I until I understood that the notion of connection to the community versus connection to the organization. And once I figured that out, um, I mean, I guess I knew I had to find the next thing, but I certainly never thought that the KU Small Business Development Center would be a place that, again, I was there 17 years, 17 years. I
At the KU?
never envisioned. Yeah.
You were at the first one for 17 years.
Yeah.
And then you were at the second one for 17 years. Well, I guess Target was in the middle of
Well, it's 17 years right now, actually. And I've been
Hmm.
not the director for almost two. So I guess only 15 years. Yeah.
So
That's
you directed the KU SBC or SBA,
SBDC. You're right. Yeah.
SBDC, okay.
For
Um,
15 years.
which stands for Small Business Development Center, I think.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Correct.
So for 15 years, and I mean, we're coming down to the end of this episode, but like,
Mhm.
what stands out as like the top moment of knowing that everything that led up to that moment like put you in the perfect place at the perfect time so you could do what?
Maybe the last moment would be sort of the top
Okay,
moment in a way. And this is really just off the top of my head. And
sure.
so I could be completely wrong. But I think we didn't talk that much about it in this episode. We talked a little bit more about it in the first episode. Like, notions of economic disparity they're hard on me. They grate at my nervous system. And so, like, I recognize that opportunities that I got probably at that first job, man, I'm not sure I would have had them if I had been anything but cisgender, white, heterosexual male. Like, any other thing outside of that, and it might have been harder in 1992 to get a supervisory job in a factory. Just be just be totally real here. My last moment as the director of the KU Small Business Development Center, I was passing on that title to a first generation college graduate female Latina, and the other full time advisor in the center is an indigenous man. And so, like, I left the center without even a white heterosexual male in any role there. And I think, like, that's where population is going. That's where business is going. Like, a community's strength, I really believe it has to be found in the diversity of that community, and in the diversity of its small business offerings, and in the diversity of experiences of the owners of those businesses. Like, all that's really important to me. I believe in it with everything I've got. And so, if I believe that's true, then I believe that an organization that exists to assist those people needs to reflect that as well. So I don't
Yeah,
know. I think that was pretty cool.
yeah,
And I love my successor. Her name is Christina Edwards, and she's awesome. And you know, I remember hiring her, and in that hiring process, I remember when she applied, and I thought, Christina's so nice. I mean, she's not going to get this job because I've got, all of these other experts and people that have worked in similar fields that are applying. We'll give her. She will tell. I'm not. This is not going to be news if she jumps on this podcast and listens. But she was a courtesy interview. And I mean, she gives me grief about that all the time, but she was,
Yeah.
and she just absolutely nailed it. And then she was, an advisor in the center for, I don't know, 3, 4, maybe 5 years. And she was just the perfect person to kind of continue the thing that kind of started with Kurt and was passed on to me. And I think I was a pretty good caretaker of it and grew it in certain ways and passed it on to Christina. And I told her at the time, and I'm not sure she believed me then, but I said, Christina, there are a lot of things I think that you're going to do better than I ever did. And there might be one or two things maybe that you don't, and that's okay. You're going to be you. I'm me. We're people. That's that. I think if you talk to her now, almost 2 years later, I actually think she knows I'm right.
Well,
So
best case scenario, she gets to stand on the shoulders of what you did, and she gets to take it to the level that only she could take it to,
she,
like,
yeah, no
yeah,
doubt. And there's already plenty of evidence that she's taking it
she's doing it.
beyond what I would have been able to do, and I'm
That's so
just keep
cool.
watching. It is, yeah.
That's so cool. Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, once again, the hour just flies by in these episodes.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe. It's been my pleasure once again to get to hear more of your story. And honestly, you know, I I hope this comes out right, but like I don't think any of the guests have some like fancy you're better than other people. Like that's why you're the one here telling your story. Like I think every guest is like a normal person with a
Mm.
normal story that probably sounds a whole lot like a lot of other stories on the planet, you know? And this is just a way to get to talk through how those decisions go. How do we move on from one chapter of our life to another? A lot of times there's a stick poking at us from behind, like forcing us
Oh, yeah.
things that
Mhm.
probably we wouldn't have done that, but there's this thing. And then all of a sudden, somebody's sitting in the middle of a moment where it's like there's no easy answer. I got this option and I got this option and I got this thing pushing me from behind. And like, what do I do? I think these episodes hopefully give some hope and some breathing space around, it's not about landing in the end all be all perfect place. It's so much more the path unfolding and kind of being willing to move with the flow of where life is trying to put you. Because probably there's more method to the madness than you can see yet. Like you got to get really far into it to like be able to look backwards and be like, oh, now I see. Now I see why
Mm.
that led to this and this led to that. And yeah, but
Yeah, it's funny, even just talking through it gives me a little bit of that. Although still, I'm just like, wow, how did I get so lucky? Like, how did I land in a thing that was perfect for me from the ages of 20 to 38
yeah,
and probably wouldn't be perfect for me at the age of 55? And now here I am that I've landed in another thing that's really kind of perfect for me. Very
it's
fortunate.
possible. It's
Yeah.
possible that it does that. And I think I mean, I know you call yourself change averse, but ultimately, like you were willing to move on. You were willing to embrace what was on the horizon, whether you like change or not. This is coming.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
like the fact that you were willing to be so proactive in applying and looking for other opportunities and not clinging to the ship that's going down like to the last minute, like you still had a decent amount of willingness to move forward on
Yeah.
wherever the path was going to take you next. And I think a little bit of that goes a long way with making the
It,
ride as smooth as it can be.
it might have been more like fear of poverty and starvation, to be perfectly honest. I mean, again, like, wasn't always the easiest childhood and
Yeah,
early adult life. So some of it's just like, ooh, don't want to do that again.
yeah. Sheer practicality of
Yeah,
like, yeah, if I'm not taking care of me, who's doing that? Like
right.
just me doing that. So we make
Yeah,
choices for all kinds of reasons. And when we're in the middle of them, I think they can feel really complicated. But often looking at choices through the lens of somebody else, suddenly things get so clear and like, oh yeah, it totally makes total sense why he did what he did. And then
mm,
somehow our own situation is a little bit easier to digest and
okay.
decide like, what's
Yeah,
right for me? What should I do? Maybe I don't have to have everything figured out to be like, you know what, I need a paycheck and this is my best option in this moment. So that's what I'm
yeah.
gonna do. And this doesn't have
Well,
to be the end all be all thing.
Yeah, of course I agree with you 100%. I hope that that bodes well for your podcast, because I think that half the time podcasting is kind of built around the reveal. Like, what is the fantastic, the the thing that's just around the bend that nobody knew was coming, but everyone should, the spectacular reveal.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, certainly in my story, like, I don't know that there's any kind of spectacular reveal at all. It's just it's a Larry Lunch bucket tale.
A steady Eddie tale. Well,
Steady Eddie tale.
I love that though, like the reveal. And I mean, I feel like so much of marketing is like trying to convince you that you have a problem just so they can sell you their solution. And this podcast is like the anti one of those because
Yeah,
I want you to know that exactly how your life is going is probably exactly how it's supposed to be going. And
yeah,
step by step by step, it can get closer to what you want it to be. But the
I
only
agree
way
with
it's
that.
going to change is step by step by step. That's the only way it works. And so I love this podcast and the way it's shaping up. I mean, we're only like 11, 12 episodes in at this point. Um,
Mhm.
but it does demonstrate that it's like the people who have these jobs where they love it, their heart's in it, they can't imagine doing anywhere anything else. They're in the perfect place at the perfect time. They didn't they weren't born there, like they lived a lot of life that evolved many times to get them to this place where their skills and the environment and like all the things match up so perfectly. Like that's not right out of the box in any of
Yeah,
these stories. So I
yeah,
think that's the reveal is that there is no magic pill. There's no magic bullet that gets you to the front of the line. Like you got to walk there
yeah.
step by step. And
Like learning a language,
yeah,
there isn't a way to do it any faster than what it takes. It
right.
just takes, you got to do reps. You got to do, time after time. Or I can't
Yeah,
remember if we talked about this last time. Malcolm Gladwell, in his book Outliers, which I really like, he he introduces this notion of expertise, and what he says is it takes, studies show it takes at least about 10,000 hours of practice to become truly expert at something.
yeah,
Like if you want to be a concert cello player, like there's no shortcut there. You have to
yeah.
just do it, do it, and do it. If you want to, shoot free throws well, you just have to do it and do it and do it and do it and do it. And I think, that holds true of almost anything.
Hmm. Yeah. And in this situation of like kind of what this podcast points to is getting to do work that matters to you and that your
Yeah.
heart and soul are in and like you there's nothing else you could think to be doing right now. That's where we
Mm-hmm.
want to get to, but yeah, like one step at a time, like you practice that. And these stories that you tell, I mean, it does pop out. Like how do you practice putting your heart into things every step along the way? And like the
Mm-hmm.
more you do that, the more reps you do, the more you're practicing like letting things matter to you and following that, leaning into the stuff you like, leaning away from the stuff you don't like. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's like any other muscle, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and your life reflects it more and more and more to you as you go. I think this is what I see.
That's interesting, because when you put it that way, it's almost like there is no other way to be in a position where you're doing work that's meaningful to you, that you are good at. Like, you have to follow the things that are meaningful to you and then spend time on them to be good at them.
Yeah. I mean,
So if
that's
you're
what
doing
I
something
believe.
that doesn't mean anything to you, stop. You
You're
got to
only
find the thing that is.
perpetuating, yeah, you're
Yeah.
you're perpetuating more of what doesn't mean anything to you.
And then you're going to be, you've again read all the studies. Like, there's some certain number. I think the last time that I came across this number, it was something like $75,000 a year in household income. And that, like, under that, any step you make up, like, leads to happier outcomes. Like, you're happier at 65 than
Right.
45.
Hmm.
Over 75, it doesn't matter. You don't get any happier from 75 to 300,000.
That's a
I think the
fact.
only thing that makes you happier, like, once you've hit that level where you're mostly taken care of, is meaning. And so, I think that's probably why there are a lot of people who are really subject to whatever social media influencing, like the jealous impulse that comes from seeing somebody have something that you don't have. It's because there's like a hole that comes from the fact that, hey, maybe you make $250,000 a year, but you're not doing anything that means anything to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe that's it. You may have just found the whole secret to the universe.
This is the reveal. This is the
This
grand
is the
reveal.
reveal. Good job, Carly. Well done.
Spontaneously. Right. Is
Man,
there
I'm
any other
definitely going to
way?
listen to
No.
this episode.
Yeah. 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 Gotta hit this one. It's got the reveal in it.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's something that we practice like anything else in the physical. It's you got to build it up a little bit at a time. And if there's even like one piece of your life where it's like for 5 minutes every Tuesday, I get to do this, and that has meaning to you, you can focus into that and kind of like expand it and massage it and nurture it into how do I get an hour of that thing every Tuesday? How do I clear my whole Tuesday to be that? How do like let it grow in your
Yeah.
life like anything else? And it does eventually like put down roots and it's a being of its own, and it takes time to get there, you know. So for that's kind of my takeaway with all of these episodes is for anybody who wants to make an impact and you're, you know, first year at a manufacturing job in a factory, like that's where you are, like, dude, like even that leads to wherever you want it to go, wherever you're open to it going. And so
Yeah.
letting things unfold one step at a time can take a lot of the pressure and the angst of I should be somewhere different right now. No,
Okay. Yeah.
you can be right where you are, and you can have the intention to move your life in a direction that feels better and better to you. That can they can both be true.
I like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Feels good to me anyway. So here we are,
Okay.
putting it
Very
out there for the world to see.
well
Oh,
done.
thank you, Will. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. As always,
My pleasure.
I love getting to hear your stories. You're fun to hang
Well,
out with. I appreciate
thank you. You're fun too. It seems pretty easy. All I'm doing is talking about stuff. So
all I'm doing is listening, you know, just and the hour just flies by. So as
yes.
far as, you know, this is look, just one more little thing. Like this is such a
Yeah.
perfect example of, you know, I haven't told any of my story yet. My episodes are coming at some point where it'll be Carly getting to tell some stories about how did Carly get to right here, right now. And even, you know, my grocery adventure started in April of 2017 with my invitation to join my grocery business. But this podcast and getting to become a podcaster is also coming out of my grocery adventure. So I opened a grocery store and like 6.5 years later started a podcast. So like
Mhm.
the jumps of the grocery store was so much more meaningful than the corporate software job I had before. And now
Ooh.
this is just that much closer to my unique skill set and a specialty that really lets me do exactly what is like close to my heart, you know? But I couldn't have gotten to the My Grocery Adventure podcast without building two grocery stores and a bunch of other stuff along the way. Like, you can't just jump there. You do have to walk through it step by step by step. So,
Oh yeah, I get it.
passionate about that.
So you're probably going to edit this out later, but who's going to interview you when it's time for you to tell your
I
story?
don't know. Do you want to apply for the job?
Yeah,
You
I
could
would
do
apply
some.
for the job. It'd
Yeah.
be kind of hard, and I don't know that I have much experience or skill as an interviewer or question asker, so I might have to do a little bit of reading up on just what it might look like to do that. But I think that would be really interesting. And whenever you do get around to having the opportunity to tell your story, if I can participate in any way,
Yeah.
please allow me.
Okay. Okay. I have a couple of people in mind and am just kind of letting the timeline unfold as far as like I'm going to be around this podcast for quite a while, and so I'm
Sure.
in no rush to tell my story in like just 2 episodes or whatever. So I'm gonna take my time with it and tell all the chapters along the way because one leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next. And yeah, for most of the time, I felt like I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what I'm doing, where I'm going. Like, how do the pieces add together? Like these things could not be more separate. And yeah, so it all came together. And it's that coming together in my own life that makes me so passionate about helping people to feel better in the part of the process before it all comes together. You know, kind of
Mm,
give some hope that these threads are going to weave themselves together someday, I promise you. You wouldn't be
yeah,
living it if it wasn't a thread you're supposed to be having
yeah,
in your tapestry. So, but yeah,
yeah.
I'll
I
definitely keep you in
totally agree.
mind for
Okay,
potential interviewer. That would be fun. Yeah,
okay,
cool.
very good.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. If you liked it, leave a like on the video, leave your thoughts down below in the comments. We'd love to interact with you there. Until next time, I hope you'll take such good care of yourselves, and so will we.